Hi, and welcome to Dynamics of Persuasion Attitude Measurement. Here's what's on our attitude and measurement agenda. We're going to do an overview, questionnaire, measures of attitude, pitfalls in attitude measurement, policy implications, asking good questions, and indirect methods to measure attitudes. There is a science to measuring attitude. The core assumption is that one can measure phenomena by assigning numbers to objects on the basis of rules or guidelines. There are three attitude scales: the Likert, the Gutman, and the Semantic Differential. Now, you've probably heard Likert mispronounced Likert. That's one of the most common mispronunciations in our discipline. The correct pronunciation is Likert. The Likert scale is a series of opinion statements that asks individuals to rate their agreement or disagreement with each statement along a numerical scale. For example, 5 points: strongly agree, somewhat agree, neutral, somewhat disagree, and strongly disagree. The Likert scale assumes each item taps the same underlying attitude and there are significant interrelationships among items. It also presumes that there are equal intervals between categories. Most researchers prefer 5 or 7-point scales. They allow respondents to indicate shades of gray in their opinions, but do not provide so many categories that people feel overwhelmed by the choices. The Gutman scale is a scale that progresses from items easiest to accept to the most difficult to endorse. Those who get a high score on the Gutman scale agree with all items. Those with moderate attitudes agree with questions that are easy and moderately difficult to endorse. Those with mildly positive attitudes agree only with the items that are easy to accept. In the semantic differential, participants rate an object based on bipolar adjectives. They explored the meanings that people attach to social objects, focusing on the emotional aspect of attitudes. For example, sweet, bitter, hot, cold, fair, unfair. Here's some of the pitfalls in attitude measurement. There's no perfect attitude scale. Inaccuracies result from such factors as respondent carelessness in answering the questions, people's desire to say the socially appropriate thing rather than what they truly believe, and a tendency to agree with items regardless of their content. Other pitfalls include the manner in which the question is asked, and that can influence the response that the researcher receives. Survey questions occurring early in the survey can influence responses to later questions. The way a question is worded can influence respondents' evaluations of the issue. So what are some policy implications? The way a question is worded or framed can shape the contours of policy debates. Manipulation of statistical information is a routine and accepted way of doing the business of political persuasion in a democracy. So what about polling? Polls have obtained strikingly different results, depending on the way the questions have been framed at all. In many cases, people polled don't have full-blown attitudes at all. Sometimes individuals construct their attitudes on the spot based on what happens to be on their minds at the time or on thoughts triggered by survey questions. Again, the framing, the language of polling shapes the outcome of the poll. So how can we try to get at truth? Well, one way is to ask good questions. Use words respondents can comprehend. Write specific and unambiguous items. Avoid double negatives. Pre-test items to make sure people understand your questions. Ask questions in different sequences to check out order effects. Avoid politically correct phrases that encourage socially desirable responses. Write items so they take the positive and the negative sides of an issue. Consider when your questions deal with sensitive, threatening issues. Allow people to say, I don't know. Include many questions to tap different aspects of an attitude. What about open-ended measures? One open-ended technique involves assessing cognitive responses to communications. Combining open-ended measures with traditional attitude scales increases the odds that the researchers will tap attitudes accurately and completely. Individuals typically read or view a message and list their cognitive reactions. These responses could be subsequently categorized by researchers according to specific criteria. The effect? People can be asked to write down emotions that they ordinarily feel toward members of a group, organization, or nation, or anything else. Open-ended measures, understanding check. Example of a survey participant task. List 10 emotions you feel when you think about the events of September 11, 2001. I encourage you to pause this video and take a second to do that. How might you categorize the responses? What else might you have asked to assess effect related to the events of September 11th? There are more indirect methods to measure attitudes. Researchers might try to use unobtrusive measures without the individual's knowledge, where behavior is used as a surrogate for attitude. This can be useful in cases where it is not possible to administer self-report skills or when fears individuals will not accurately report attitudes. Physiological indirect measurements are frequently impractical and expensive. Some of the things that have been used as an indirect method to measure attitudes include galvanic skin response, which is a change in the electrical resistance of the skin. They've also used pupil dilation and EMG, or facial electromyographic techniques, which are basically the movement of the facial muscles. Also, they've used response time, the length of time it takes to agree or disagree with a statement. In that physiological measurement of response time, the implicit association test is used. It measures the latency or length of time it takes people to indicate if they agree or disagree with a statement. The assumption is that the longer it takes people to access their attitude, the less developed or strong the attitude is. So here's where we've been. We've discussed the Likert, Gutman, and Semantic Differential scales. We discussed the pitfalls of attitude measurement, how people should go about asking good survey questions, and a couple of indirect methods to measure attitudes.